Guinea. A very good evening to you and welcome to Power Brief on this 25th day of the month of November, the year 2021. And tonight we take another different approach. Yes, we'll be talking on matters surrounding politics with a bias on the 2022 general election. But we shall be looking into the procedures, the legal structures and a number of things that affects this election. Tonight we're joined by Dr. Ruben West. Dr. Ruben West is World Civility Ambassador 2019 USA, United States of America, Voice of Civility. Dr. Ruben West is a speaker, trainer, and a products developer. He has received numerous awards, including President's Lifetime Achievement Award from President Barack Obama in the year 2016. Tonight, we look into a number of things that surrounds a general election, and we're having a guest who has even done a number of publications regarding campaign civility, winning the hearts of the people in a things to do with the elections. And we also have something in Kiswahili, Ustaarabu katika kampeni. This book has the translation of it. We are going to discuss these matters on what is the conduct of the citizens, conduct of the government and the non-governmental organizations. My name is Cornelius Omuse and I welcome you to this conversation that's also live on our Facebook page, CAC TV Kenya, and YouTube is CAC TV Kenya. Welcome to Power Brief tonight, Dr. Ruben West.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here and I'm glad to be back.
This is the second time you are on Power Brief.
Yes.
You went back to the United States and also you've come back again. I feel much more welcomed in this place.
Thank you.
And we've had this conversation, and even today during the devolution conference where all governors are meeting in one of the counties in Kenya, they're still discussing about climate change, and this issue seems to have really caused a lot of things. We have some of the diseases, we have a number of natural calamities happening, and it's being attributed to this climate change. Mm-hmm. And we want to have your view over this matter and probably just a brief submission on what you think also from your experience could be the best approaches towards addressing this matter.
I think the main thing we have to do for climate change is try to understand from the other people's perspective. I live in the United States, and when you talk to most people about climate change, they're not affected. Why? Because if it's winter, we put our heat on 70. Mm-hmm. If it's summer, we put our heat on 70. Mm-hmm. And so we could just walk in the house and adjust our thermostat to 70 degrees. So climate change does not affect us like it does other areas of the world. And so I think if we're really going to understand the climate change problem, we have to understand it from the other people's perspective, mm-hmm. not necessarily from our perspective, because mm-hmm. we may not experience like other people do.
Mm-hmm. And besides that, also, we have this discussion. The Kenyan head of state mentioned it the other day, and also today it was being mentioned that despite the fact that the continent of Africa is contributing close to a very little percentage of the emissions of gases that are contributing to this issue, it's also being said that African continent is really bearing the hugest brunt when it comes to climate change. And probably those ones who are observing this issue well, they are really seeing another window and doors of blame games. How do you think this matter can be addressed without pointing fingers that yes, we are suffering, but we are not the ones contributing to these matters?
I think that you, just like I talk with campaign civility, you have to attack the problem, not the country. You have to attack the problem, not the person. Mm-hmm. The other thing I think would really benefit Africa is that it worked together as a collective. You know, in the United States, it's 50 different states. And so we come together as a united front or a united force. Mm-hmm. I can't imagine one state going against the world, mm-hmm. or one state trying to push their agenda or talk about themselves to the world. Mm-hmm. And that's what Africa faces. A lot of countries, and some of them are very small, mm-hmm. and they try and project their voice out to the world, mm-hmm. and they don't have the leverage, they don't have the bargaining power. Mm-hmm. But if the African countries can come together mm-hmm. and work together to address these issues, and not only address the issues, mm-hmm. but be seen as a collective, I think it would give them much more bargaining power when they come to the table.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Doctor, on that. Now, to our tonight's topic regarding the path to peaceful, free and fair elections. And probably as this is happening, there could be questions arising. You know, sometimes you are in a discussion with someone and then they tell you that one does not concern me. But we'd like to get it from you and also from your experience. Do we really say that the issue or the responsibility of ensuring free and peaceful election is pegged on a particular stakeholder, an individual or institution? Who is really concerned or who is supposed to take responsibility?
Well, it's everybody's responsibility. And let me tell you when it's really noticeable. See, when you don't get involved ahead of time, it's okay, but then there's after the fact. And so if you look back at the previous years where they had the violence or the post-election violence, who suffered the consequences of property damage, government building damages were damaged, personal properties were damaged, stores were closed, businesses were looted, businesses lost money. Who suffered the consequences? 300,000 displaced people. Who suffered the consequences? Everybody suffered the consequences. So whose responsibility is it? In my opinion, it's everybody's responsibility. And here's the funny thing. There's a price for it. There's a price for civility. There's a price for the peaceful election. But here's the other thing. There's a cost for not paying the price, and it's usually a lot higher. And so I think it's everybody's responsibility, and if we work together, I think we can achieve that.
And then there's been a notion, probably sometimes when elections are being held before, during, and after, and whenever something like violence arises, people say, that's how Africa, or in Africa, that's how elections are supposed to be done. Is it the right thing? Is it an imposed ideology or a perception? Or it is something that has a basis to cling on, and probably how can it be addressed?
It does have a basis because it's happened before. The problem is everybody gets excited about it right before it happens and when it's happening, and then a little bit after it's happening, and then they forget about it until the period comes up again. And so if we're going to change it, we have to change it in the long term. It is not going to be solved in 3 months, 5 months, or 6 months. And there's a great deal of civic education that has to be done to talk about what is it that causes the violence, how does it start, and then what can be done when it starts, and then who all plays a role in it. Does the media play a role in it? Do the campaign participants play a role in it? Do the citizens play a role in it? I think we all play a role in it, and I think that there's a way to stop it, but it has to be a long-term process.
Still on that, Doctor, you having conducted very many campaigns across the world, particularly in Africa, there's been these basis of argument that when it comes to election, there are those people who say that actually elections is not or was not an African thing. And they can take you to history, talking of when you go to how Africans used to lead themselves, they'll talk of the kingdoms. The other time you were here, we even talked of the Buganda kingdom. We talked of when you go to South Africa today, you realize that we have, yes, the president, Cyril Ramaphosa is there with his government, but under him, there are kings and queens.
Of course.
And they are saying that now mixing these system, bring the democracy, which they believe that it's a foreign ideology that has it has had a huge difficulty in penetrating into Africa. How do you think this can be harmonized? Can it evolve step by step, or if possible, Africans to revert where they were before?
You know, I think what the answer to that is it can evolve, but the technique by which people are elected has to evolve. Look at it this way. It's interesting to me when you hear people talk, and maybe even just a few short weeks ago or a month or so ago, they were Kenyans. And then all of a sudden they become tribesmen when it becomes election time. Now they're not speaking for Kenya as a whole. Now they're speaking for their tribe. And then you know what they do? They pull up a whole litany of things that has happened in the past to get those tribesmen riled up to say, hey, we got to do something about it. And that's a technique. That's a technique. It's not real because 2 months ago they weren't talking about it. 3 months ago it wasn't an issue. But because it rolls into election time, now it becomes an issue. The question is, why does it become an issue now? Because it works. It works. It works. That's why I wrote the book, Campaign Civility, Winning the Hearts of the People to Win the Election, because there's another way to win the election as opposed to just riling people up, putting one tribe against another tribe, putting the haves versus the have-nots, putting the youth against each other or the youth against the people that are of majority age. There's a new way. There's another way. But if we don't practice a new way of doing it, then it won't be a new way of having it.
So according to you, you feel like there are processes that have to be followed, because when you even go to the history of countries like the United States of America, with the democracy being among the founders of democracy, there are procedures that were followed.
Yes.
So do we give also Africans time to evolve slowly by slowly moving there?
I think you can give them time to evolve, but the point is, it doesn't have to take as long if you learn from the mistakes that other people have made. Even in the United States, we experienced some violence in the transition of our government and our leadership, and this was the first time in a long time. And the question is, why was there violence? And I believe it was because of the incivility during the campaign. It was because of the incivility during the process. And when those things aren't checked, it leads to violence. See, everybody talks about peace, but they have to understand that peace is the destination and the civility is the transportation that gets you to the peace. Those little discourteous things become major because they get magnified in the media. People post about it on social media. They talk about it, and then it becomes a major issue. And then you have exactly what you saw in the United States. So we are a great example that it doesn't mean that it can't happen again. So that's why I said civility is a long-term process, and it always has to be renewed. It always has to be talked about again. It always has to be reviewed so that we don't fall back into what you just saw in the United States.
Talking of civility, actually you've touched a very important part of our discussion tonight. And you've actually elaborated that peace is not actually, it's the destination but not the process. So at times you realize that when the campaigns are going on, the mobilization, the lobbying, people, politicians moving up and down, there's some tones probably that are used, words that are used, and to a point that when it comes to a point of it being chaotic, people do not realize that when this seed was being planted, it was not leading to such an issue. So tonight we wish you to really help our viewers understand this part. When you see such a sign, or these could be a cause of chaotic elections, what are some of these things that really leads to chaotic elections? I
think when candidates attack each other. You know, one of the things I talk about in my book when I talk about the best campaign practices is attack the problem, not the person. See, when you attack the person, there's a lot of people that stand behind that person. They have supporters as well. And so now you're not only offending them, but you're also offending their supporters, and they want their voice to be heard. They want to stand up and be counted. They want to get in the mix. And so what happens is those little acts of incivility grow. And here's what happens, Cornelius. By the time the violence starts, nobody recognizes what caused it. It's almost like a forest fire. When there's a forest fire, what difference does it make what sparked it? Now it's burning all over, and you have to mobilize all the resources. And a lot of times they can't go back and track down what actually caused it. But we know what causes the violence and the disruption in campaigns, and it's those little acts of incivility that start off small, you know, and then they go unchecked, and then there's retaliation. One person says something about someone, the other person says something back, and now it's going back and forth, and then after a while it gets out of hand. So I think if we implement the civility strategies now, before it gets to that point, I think we'd be much better off.
There are issues that arises even before the campaigns period. For instance, an election is done in the year 2017, and immediately a particular front takes over power. Then they start exhibiting certain tendencies, or they start executing their mandate in a way that there is a section of the population that does not feel that they're being represented well. So before even we reach into elections, because some of these things builds way before even campaigns periods begins. So civility now takes us back before elections, and you could help us to understand some of these best civility approaches that when a government is in place, it is able to do things and even seal some of these loopholes that leads to chaotic elections.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that we have to do, and I'm going to task the new government, whoever wins. I don't know who's going to win. I encourage everyone to vote twice. The first vote is for civility, and the second vote is for the candidate of their choice. But I think what I think has to happen is whoever wins, whoever takes over, I think they have to push for a strong front for civility, the civic education in the schools, in the government, in the businesses, so that when it's time to pick the next candidates 5 years from now, you know what to look for.
Sure.
Listen to this, Cornelius. In the United States, they say the divorce rate is about 50%. Now, I don't know if that's actually the case, but why is that when most couples go through premarital counseling? I'll tell you why I believe it is, because they've already picked the person that they want to marry. So you can't out-counsel a bad choice. You understand? You already picked the person, now you're going to counseling. The counseling should have came before you ever started picking, so you knew how to make a better choice.
Sure.
We have to do the exact same thing with government. We have to teach the civic education on civility before it's time to make a decision of who to pick. Now you can see who the people that's upholding the standards, that are campaigning in a positive way, the people who are trying to win the hearts and minds of the people and not divide the people. But if you don't know what to look for ahead of time, you end up picking based on usually the person you know, the person that's your tribe. Yeah.
Now, this thing also that comes out, which we talked about, the African continent, the approaches to elections. There is also the issue of incumbents. Sometimes probably they are attributed that they do not usually concede defeat. And those ones who observe politics with a third eye says that those ones who are also aspirants usually threaten the incumbents,
right,
to a point that an incumbent feels, no, I cannot really leave power. How do you really advise these two sides, the ones who are wishing to take power and the ones who are in power, that how do they conduct themselves in a way that their actions and threats do not really amount to a situation that can lead to possible violence?
The great thing is there's usually legal structures in place, and what happens is they don't follow those legal structures. I'm not in a position to coach a government on their legal policies, but what I will say is that they've usually dealt with those things ahead of time. The problem is people don't follow the protocols that's been set up ahead of time, and I think in those situations they have to be held accountable. I think they have judicial systems that are much better equipped to make the decision of how to hold them accountable than I am, but I think that's the problem. If the term is 4 years, like in the US the term is 4 years, then there's a new election. If you win, great, then you get another 4 years. If you don't, then you're out in 8 years. And then there's no option for you to continue. So I think if they want to make it so that someone is required to leave power, I think it has to be a law that says, hey, here's the term limits that you can have, and when those terms are up, you have to leave power. And then there has to be a system of the government and the law enforcement that holds people accountable to that. Now the question is, why is it that they don't want to leave power? See, that's the real question, because there's something that makes them say, no, I have to stay. I can't peacefully transition out of leadership. And I think you have to get to the bottom of why that is to understand what makes them want to hold on, even when they know they lost, or they feel they lost, or their term is up.
It takes us somewhere, probably before we take a commercial break. When you talk of civility or civilization, it takes us to history. Sometimes even when you hear some of these people talking probably from the Great Britain, from the United States of America, they'll always refer a lot of things to their civilization. And there is a process that really made them. There is that thing that triggered them and made them to sit down, and they said, hey, look here, we have really to pursue this and be civilized to a point that you have 52 independent states talking that we, the people of the United States, we, the people of the United Kingdom. What really contributed to this, to a point that even Africans can begin to emulate?
I think what contributed to it is they looked at the way it was done before, and they evaluated what worked and what didn't work, and then they tried to figure out how can we make it work for everybody that we want it to work for. Now, me being a citizen of the United States, I know that originally when they founded the country, it wasn't me that they were founding it for, but the collective consciousness over time adjusted those laws. So there was a time in the United States that women couldn't vote. The collective consciousness said that wasn't right. Now they can vote. Blacks couldn't vote. The collective consciousness said that wasn't right. Now they can vote. Segregation. The collective consciousness said that's no longer valuable, and they did away with that. So here's what we learned, that right and wrong is not really right and wrong. It's just all depending on the place and time. In the U.S., at one time, it was right for just a certain group of people to vote. Now that's wrong, but it came about with the change of the collective consciousness. I think how Africa evolves, or Kenya evolves specifically, is a change in the collective consciousness. People usually rise to the demands. They rise to meet the demands. And if the collective citizenship demand a different way that campaigns are done, I think every candidate is capable of rising to that level. But if they don't have to, why would they? You know, you have to hold them to a standard. First, you have to set the standard and hold them to it. But if you don't set the standard, then you can't blame them for not doing it, because it's not the standard.
There is a bottom line, Dr. Ruben West, that really usually contributes or triggers when probably myself, I realize that, hey, my candidate has not made it as a president, and I feel threatened to a point that I feel I must riot, I must participate, or I feel unsafe. There is this bottom line thing that probably in the developed nations that makes people to worry and take elections as a do or die situation.
Yeah.
What could be this thing?
I think attitude reflects leadership. It doesn't matter who the candidate is. It depends on the words that they use and the tone that they use and the directions that they give to the people that they're overseeing or the people that are supporting them. I think if they go in an aggressive manner, then people are likely to become aggressive. If they go in a peaceful manner, then people are likely to be peaceful. But attitude reflects leadership, and a lot of times when the leaders are upset that they didn't win and they incite people to take action, it's costly. Now, here's the thing, Cornelius. A lot of times the candidate may lose the election, but people can lose their lives. So while they're out there rioting over the fact that their candidate lost, the candidate is usually not out there rioting. And in Kenya, what we've seen is a lot of times has been the youth out there. And so they can do something permanently foolish because they were temporarily upset. And so what we have to do is we have to call for the leadership to speak in a way that reflects what we want to see in the country. And that's peace. Yeah.
So again, when it comes to the issues of resources, you find out that these talks are very keen, or they're very obvious in some of these African countries. I'm concentrating on Africa because
of course, yeah,
this is where
should.
we are, and
Yeah.
these are continents that all of us have to put efforts towards ensuring that really civility spreads to all corners. It's viewed in most circumstances that distribution of resources has been a major factor when it comes to contributing to violence erupting every now and then.
Yeah, you know, one of the things, and I talk about this in the book, is that when you're campaigning, it's hard to do a polarized campaign and then once you win, unify the country, because your message during the campaign was to a certain group or to a certain tribe or to a certain class. And now you're the president, not for that group, tribe, or class, but for the whole country. And now you have to unify the country. But unfortunately, the whole time during the campaign, the words weren't geared toward unification. Now, one thing I believe, Cornelius, is that the politicians are smart enough to use what works. And so they had to use what works. But then it's hard to turn the corner once you win to say, okay, now I'm actually campaigning for everybody. Now I'm actually the president of everyone, and I care about you too. That's difficult. That's difficult. And that's why when you run a polarized campaign, it's hard to get people to even believe. Even if you have real intentions to providing resources to those individuals that maybe you weren't speaking to during the campaign, it's hard for them to believe it.
Thank you so much. Before we go for a commercial break, we have comments, overwhelming responses from our viewers. We have Donald Tolson. He's saying civility for Kenya. Sonia Robinson, collaboration work to bring civility. Thank you so much. Dominic Obadiah, civility for all. Thank you so much. Sonia Robinson's learn from your mistakes and put learning into actions. And then we have Kathy Brown Barton, accountability and civility, her first cousin. They're independent. Collective responsibility, consciousness, we must come together for the betterment of the country. Thank you so much. Tracy Ward, attitude reflects leadership. Many thanks. We have Sonia Robinson again, polarize versus unify. And Tracy Ward saying we must hold those in office accountable. We go for a quick commercial break. When we come on the second part, we shall now be looking into some of the approaches that needs to actually be put into account to ensure that the country remains one during, before and after the general election. 9 months from now, Kenyans will be going to the ballot centers to elect their members of county assemblies, members of parliament, senators, governors, women representatives, and the highest office on land, that is the president. And we're exploring ways on how to put the country together always. Dr. Ruben West, civility ambassador from iChange Nations, is with us in studio tonight. Keep it here on CAT TV.
PCEA Ongata Booth Girls High School of Excellence is an outstanding girls boarding high school ideal for learning. Located in a quiet and serene environment in Ongata Rongai, Kajiado County. The school aims to produce highly qualified students who will be readily admitted to world-class high institutions of learning and graduate into outstanding citizens of integrity.
Our school is an excellent school which has all the facilities. We offer quality education in conformity with the Ministry of Education. We have very professional teachers.
The main reason to have this school here is to empower the girl child here around this area, nationally and even internationally.
Founded and grounded on Christian values, discipline is one of its fundamental values.
We emphasize on Christian values, and our children, when they are here, they can access our church, which is just across. And we have a pool of things that they do when they are here, and we emphasize on discipline.
The school boasts of modern state-of-the-art facilities such as spacious classrooms, a well-equipped library, science and computer laboratories, a dining hall and a modern kitchen with a robust feeding program. We take keen interest in nurturing students' talents, hence our semi-Olympic sized swimming pool and spacious fields.
We are appealing to you once again that you give us the girl and we will give you back a holistic lady of dignity and integrity.
This is PCA of Ongata Booth Girls High School of Excellence. Faith in God is knowledge and excellence.
Welcome back and many thanks for tuning in to KAK TV on Power Brief tonight as we look into civility for Kenya, focusing on the path to a free, fair and peaceful elections. That is the general election of the year 2022 here in Kenya. And our guest tonight, Dr. Reuben West, is helping us go into a number of processes, a number of procedures and things that should be put into consideration to ensure that the country remains one before, during and after the general election. We appreciate for your feedback and some of the comments and also questions that you're posting on our social media platforms. We will be here probably to ask some Dr. Reuben West and some just to comment on what you have actually sent to us tonight. Dr. Reuben West, before we went for a break, we had actually looked into the possible causes of violence and probably how can we deter them or to stop them as a country and other players. But there are these factors again here that are very important, and those who understand it, they talk of when used correctly, they can lead to peace, and when used in the wrong way, also it can lead to a number of trouble. So here we look into these issues, looking on when it is not used properly, what can it cause, and when it's used rightly, what can it achieve, beginning with religion. Here is the beliefs of people, belief of the supernatural. What are some of these ways that if people approaches religion in a bad way, that can lead to violence?
Well, I think when you use religion to divide, you know, at I Change Nations, we talk about the golden rule, and the golden rule is treating people the way you want to be treated. And what I've found is that every single religion has some sort of golden rule statement. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Sikhism, I'm a stranger to no one, no one's a stranger to me. Indeed, I'm a friend to all. Treat not others in ways you would find harmful if treated to you. All of these different religions have a golden rule statement, and what they're saying is it doesn't matter. They didn't say do unto other Christians or do unto other Muslims. It's do unto others. And so when you use it as the principle that it says, this golden rule statement, you understand that every religion, every major religion has a statement that says there's a way that you should treat other people, and it is the way you would want to be treated. And so I think when religion is used in that way, it's very effective. When it's used outside of that context to divide or to justify a way of treatment that is not civil, then it's going to cause problems.
Here comes another tricky issue, although I know you have the answer in it. At some point we had some of the terror attacks happening, some of the radicalization, and people tried to associate it with the religion from the other side. But those who belong to that religion came out openly and they were saying our religion does not really promote this, but what people had been made to believe is that this particular religion promotes this. How do we really come in to ensure and verify that indeed it's not true that this religion promotes this? Because when such information comes, you might find people from another religion are probably causing more trouble to the other religion, only to know later on that they do not subscribe to whatever they have been propagated against.
But when you look at religion, and it doesn't matter what religion there is, there's probably millions to billions of people that subscribe to that religion. I mean, how many Christians are there? How many Muslims? Over 1 billion. And so anytime you get numbers that big, you're allowed to have a few idiots. You know what I'm saying? Sure. It's not the whole religion. It's not all the people. It's not all the tribe. There's people that get overly emotional. And if you're listening, remember this, that emotion can hijack logic. See, that's the problem when the people who are running for election use this rhetoric that gets people emotionally stirred. What happens? Emotion can hijack logic. So now they start hurting people. They start tearing up property. They start doing damage. Why? Because they're emotional. And so the key is to not get them heightened in emotion. Don't raise their emotion. Improve your argument. You know, you don't have to get them emotionally charged, but it works. Why do they do it? Because it works. So you understand when they've been taught a way to win, and the way to win is to divide and conquer. If that's what works, you can't blame them for doing it. That's why we have to teach them a different way. I don't blame the people who are not using civility tactics to win the election. It hasn't been promoted. And so somebody has to do something. And I think we are all that somebody.
It comes now to something else after religion, and thank you so much for bringing out how it can really be used in the positive way and how people can really ascertain that this information is true concerning this religion. There is this issue of tribe. Due to time, I could give a number of examples of how tribes view each other, like how tribe A views tribe B, how tribe B views tribe C, and there is sometimes you find very funny statements like, those are not people. Okay, they are human beings, but due to some of the beliefs that people have been put into their hearts, is that when you harm someone from this tribe, it's no problem, but if you harm one of your own, it's a problem. How do we really also come to understand, or how do we really push or put the message across that no matter how you look like, no matter your tribe, most likely you're just the same person, only that
you're from a different area.
Yeah.
It's education. You know, this is not magic, it's education. You made a good point. You know, in the United States, we're born Republican or we're born Democrat, depending on the family we're in. And then later on, we find out why, and we make the decision whether we want to stay that way or not. The same thing here in Kenya. They're born in a certain tribe, and that tribe indoctrinates them on certain beliefs. So if the belief is it's okay to harm this tribe, then they think that way. They literally believe it. How do you change it? You change the belief. How do you change belief? Through a new level of education. And so I think the problem is we focus on their behavior, the harming of this person, the tearing up of the property. But you don't focus on behavior, you focus on belief, because belief creates behavior. Now, how do you change belief? Through education. They have to be trained in a different way. And there's never too soon to start. There is no age that we can't start training them in a different way. And let's be honest, Cornelius, there's some people, because of their age, we have a saying in the United States, and maybe you've heard it, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And so there may be some people that are of age that are never going to change. And that's why the youth are so important, because now we can start training them and working with them now to understand the power that civility brings to a country. And hopefully through that education, it can change over time.
So this actually brings this matter of the globalization and civilization. It now comes to these sustainable development goals and the MDGs. I think it has it been factored clearly? Because you know what should happen in Kenya, in South Africa, when you go to Tunisia, when you go to Bahamas, all those countries. Have these matters been captured in the SDGs to ensure that at least at some point all global men and women are somewhere at par when it comes to politics, when it comes to social life, when it comes to economic life and world views?
No, it hasn't been captured enough. You see, one of the things I've learned is that in our country, we're looking at climate change and these sustainable goals for the future. We want to protect our future. We want to save our future. But what enough people don't look at is there's countries where kids aren't eating right now. They're not trying to protect the future. They're trying to figure out what to do right now, today. And so while we are looking way out there. They're looking right here. And the problem is we don't feel it in the same way. It doesn't affect us in the same way. The same way I talked about climate change. What's climate change? We go put our thermostat on 70. What we have to do is we have to take a more global approach and understand what other people are going through. Once we understand, the best way to connect with a human being is to be one. If you see somebody get hit, you'll jump. It didn't hurt you. But there's a feeling that you have because somebody else gets hurt. But they don't help us understand what's going on globally. We see what's going on locally in our own state or in our own country. And so it doesn't expand us to say, we need to make a change, not for our benefit, but for their benefit. I believe that if we expanded that knowledge and we got people more integrated on what's going on in other continents, what's going on for other people, they would be willing to make more adjustments, and they would be willing to look at things more fair and equitably. The other thing is we have to look at the leadership to say, hey, wait a minute. Here's what is mind-boggling to me. Africa receives a lot of money. A lot of money, a lot of aid, a lot of resources. Where does it go? Where does it go? I've been seeing Help Africa commercials since I was a kid. And a lot of people give money. It's almost like with that amount of money coming in, there really shouldn't be any poverty. There probably shouldn't be any hunger. But for some reason, it's not making its way down to the people who need it. And so whether that's intentional or whether it's a lack of systems being in place, I think the right government and the right leadership can look into that and solve that problem.
Which actually anchors its foundation on civilization. We come into that part also called gender, which communication experts have got, they're still trying to really find out. Sometimes, people have got different descriptions or definitions of gender. Yeah. And you realize that also there is this gender card, how it's usually used on politics. And sometimes it brings problems to a point that even it scares people of certain genders. And when we come to hear these, in particular the women, to even shy off from politics. Last week when we had Barbara here, we looked into the 21st century woman, and we were looking at how she has evolved to a point that she can also stand and vie and even for presidency and rule a country. But still, from where we are tonight, how do we really continue to improve on gender to see that it can also promote free, fair and peaceful elections?
I think what we miss is that everyone is given a solution. I believe we were all created on purpose, for a purpose, and with a purpose. But unless you really believe that, then you don't work to try and help this person or this gender or this tribe bring their gift to the table. Civility for all means that everybody should have the opportunity to bring their gifts to the table, to bring their talents to the table. And watch this, they're not just bringing it for themselves, they're bringing it for all of us. I mean, when we're looking for a global solution, we really don't care where it comes from. We really don't care if it was a male or a female who brought it to a table, if it was a Muslim, Christian, or Hindu that brought it to the table. If we had an issue with COVID, I don't think we mind who brings us the solution. The problem is when we are not mindful of the fact that everybody has a contribution to make, then we don't make it fair so that everyone can bring their contribution to the table. We should at least make it so that they have the opportunity to bring their contribution to the table. And when we don't, we have to understand that we're losing. God in his infinite wisdom, whichever God you believe in, he believed in male and female. If he felt like there was only one gender that was necessary, he probably would have only made one. If he felt like there was only one religion necessary, there probably would have only been one. So God in his infinite wisdom created multiple genders, created multiple religions, created multiple thought processes, and I believe that they're all necessary. And as a global country, right, because we're talking about globalization, it's everybody working together collectively. I think we have to come to the understanding that we really need one another, and if we work together, we're going to get a lot farther ahead.
Thank you, Doctor. Still on that, looking back in history, you realize that during colonization, even the United States was colonized by the Britons. Kenya here, we were also colonized by the Britons. And they had this program whereby they could come, find a brilliant young person, they take this person on a full scholarship to their country. I believe it's still there even up to now. And those ones who've been trying to make comparisons, especially here in Africa, they talk of those that were taken there during those seasons and they came back. They really contributed a lot towards promoting civilization as compared to those ones that are getting scholarships. Nowadays they go, but they come back still with the same mind that they traveled abroad with. What could have caused this change?
I think one of the things that we have to look at is that the education system has to be for expanding the mind, not just programming. I read a quote that said the purpose of education is to turn an empty mind into an open one. And it doesn't seem that education is used like that. The education now is used to promote a line of thinking, not to get you to think in a way that creates new possibility. And so the goal is to start educating people in a way, or to help them see that they can come up with a new solution. The other thing is, most of the philosophies we use now are from people that are no longer with us. You know, we're still quoting Plato and Aristotle and Socrates, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there's some pretty brilliant people right now that can bring us some new ideology, and I think we have to start looking at that. As great as it is, we don't use horse and buggy a lot. We use cars and planes and trains because we evolve. And I think we have to also evolve our thinking, especially in a globalized world, in a global economy. Yeah.
Thank you, Doctor. This leads us to something crucial, and probably it relates to what we are doing here. A number of times the media has really been involved or accused of being part and parcel of those ones that have been fueling violence. In the year 2007-2008, when violence broke in Kenya, one of the journalists was actually implicated at the International Criminal Court. And moving to 2013 to 2017 also, there are those pointers, and people are pointing fingers particularly to media practitioners, what comes out of media. And probably your input also on this, because media practitioners are watching us all over the world, and probably they can learn from you also tonight that, look here, even though politicians are using this, there is a way you can air the news and in a way enable the viewer understand that this is not meant to trigger them more, but it's a way of just communicating how to fine-tune communication to really prevent violence and to serve as a catalyst.
You know, it's interesting, Cornelius. What I've found is that some programming is used for entertainment, but some entertainment is used for programming. And so a lot of times when they're airing the news, they have an agenda. And it's different when the news is aired agenda-free. I think what they have to realize is that words have power, and they know they do, or we wouldn't have commercials. People pay for those commercials because they know a 30-second spot will influence the people that are watching. I think the responsible thing to do for the people who are the broadcasters, the news stations, the reporters, is that they have to realize that words have power and that attitude reflects leadership and authority. When you're on TV, you're an authority. And I'm sitting here as an authority talking about civility for Kenya. You're sitting here as an authority. So when you're the news, you're an authority, and people have the tendency to believe you. They had a tendency to follow what you say, to take what you say to heart. And so the way you paint the news or paint the picture of what happened is going to create an effect. And what we've done is we have switched the paradigm, where before we were looking at the truth, and the truth is the authority. When we talk about religious practices, they say, hey, this is the truth and it is now the authority. So the Bible says this, or the Quran says this, or the Kabbalah says this, and that's the authority. But we've almost switched the paradigm till whoever in authority is the truth. So when somebody is in authority and they say it, it just becomes the truth, as opposed to the truth being the authority. Now who's in authority becomes the truth. And we have to get back to switching that paradigm back to where we stand for something that is not depending on who's in office at this time. We need some other standards for truth.
This brings us to Another contentious matter here, the social media with the digital revolution, Facebook, all
Twitter,
those that
Instagram,
name
yeah,
them.
yeah,
There are a lot of them there, including currently we have an app which can put there Dr. Ruben West's video, the way you're talking, and then they mimic your voice, and probably your voice comes out, Dr. Ruben West insulting somebody,
exactly,
insulting or throwing, spewing very venomous words to a particular, probably an opponent, probably a tribe. And some of these things actually have been viewed as a possible explosive when it comes to the period of campaigns, during elections, and even after elections. As a person that has handled a number of products development and also handled crises here and there, probably there's a way you can enable our viewers to understand tonight to verify fake news and crafted news which are really aimed at causing havoc, and probably before they react, you can have something to tell the viewers.
Well, the first thing I want to tell the leadership is that we should hold those people accountable that produce those ads. You know, if it's not illegal, there's nothing you can do about it. So I think the first thing that has to come into place is the laws have to be set up so that you cannot strategically lie, falsify information against a political candidate just for your own personal gain. Now, once that becomes a law, especially in an app where you're faking a voice, making it look like they said something that they didn't say, I think once you make that a law, then there's a level of accountability you can hold to the people. But if there is no consequences, what stops them from doing it? Nothing. They're going to do it. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is that the people have to understand that when it's political season, unfortunately, this becomes the norm. And so they have to take the time to not just believe everything they hear, but look at it historically. It's always interesting to me during the political season. Now they can point out everything that this person's done wrong, but nobody said anything over the last 5 years. If they were doing wrong, shouldn't something have been said 2 years ago, 3 years ago? But now it's all highlighted. Here they did this, and they did this, and they did that. Yeah, it could be, but a lot of times it's just positioning. The other thing is, I think people have to get to the point where they understand that there's a benefit in positive campaigning, that they could talk about the issues, because what happens, Cornelius, is after a while, nobody's talking about what the issues are. They're focused on the behavior of the candidate. They said this, they did this, they spewed this, they talked about this. So who's talking about the policies? Who's talking about who's supposed to get what, or what change are they bringing? They're not even mentioning those things. So unfortunately, we get focused on the behavior and not focused on what the policies are that's going to change our country or change the country that they're in.
Thank you, Doctor. We now go to the civility. Here we're having for Kenya, but your profile talks of a number of countries that you've handled, and probably you'll help us some of the approaches that you've had before, because what you're doing as a civility ambassador can also be emulated with someone else, because it's a candle that when you light, you can also light another candle.
Exactly.
People can pick up from you that even as you leave Kenya for another destination, they can also use such an approach which really yielded fruits in your bid to promote peaceful campaigns, peaceful voting, and peaceful probably transfer of power and receiving of the results of the elections. Yeah.
You know, in Gary, Indiana, in the United States, the governor literally signed a proclamation for civility. They brought together the Republicans, the Democrats, the opposing sides, and they came together and they realized that they were doing a detriment and a disservice to the people of the community through incivility. And so, and let me tell this to the viewers, I'm not saying civility can save the country, but I am saying that a lack of it can destroy the country. And so it's best to try and do something. They decided that they would come together and use civil practices in their campaign and the way they talk to each other and the way they treat each other. And because both sides came together and the governor, the leader, signed the proclamation, it made a tremendous difference. And I'll be honest, just like in Kenya with tribes, in the U.S. with Republican, Democrat, sometimes there's no farther apart than you could be, but they still came together for the betterment of everyone involved. Where I think we miss it is that we don't realize that the purpose is not to focus on now. We have to look at what kind of country are you creating for the future generation. Because they're going to have to live with the policies. They're going to have to live with the decisions. And a lot of times, people don't recognize the incivility. They don't recognize the chaos, the controversy, because it's always been there. Listen to this, Cornelius. I don't know who it was that discovered water, but I'm sure it wasn't the fish. They've lived in it their whole life. But only when you take them out of it do they realize they're out. Only when you add something in it do they realize they're in it. And I think sometimes it takes that outside voice to come in, like I'm doing, and just try and give a new perspective. Can I do it by myself? Of course not. But I know that I can lend to the process, and then Kenya has some great people that can help carry it forward.
Thank you. Now, your parting shot, Doctor, just as we began, we talked of it's 9 months to the general elections. A number of things are happening in preparation to that. But still, you have something to tell Kenyans, especially when they encounter the politicians, when they listen to government multi-agencies that are tasked to conduct the elections, when they also listen even to other neighbors from other countries, people who interact with them either through social media. You have a word to Kenyans.
Absolutely, I have a word, and my word is to vote twice. The first vote for civility and the second vote for the candidate of your choice. I'm looking for individuals that want to help me in this civility campaign, and if they go to www.civilityforkenya.org, that's www.civilityforkenya.org, you can connect with me and we can talk about how you can join me in the Civility for Kenya campaign.
Thank you. That is Dr. Reuben West, who is a World Civility Ambassador 2019, United States of America Voice of Civility. Tonight we've had our time to look into issues surrounding elections in Kenya, 9 months to the general elections. We've looked into some of the dangers, the use of the social media incitement, and some of the steps that the governments and other stakeholders can take in order to see that countries remain together. And we've even gone further to look into examples of developed and developing democracies across the world. We appreciate your overwhelming responses and feedback on our social media platform. And as we always say, that our mantra, our national mantra on Power Brief is our national mantra of peace, love, and unity. That no matter what happens, Power Brief focuses on information, because we know that information is power. From me, Cornelius Omuse, and all those who took part in making this production a success, till next Thursday, God willing, I wish you a very good night.